So Donald Trump declares a national emergency, and the Democrats want to stop him. Vox puts together this list, which I saw, and I thought, it'll be interesting to go through the various ways they can try and stop him. Except there's only one way. Just lawsuit. I don't understand why they made it a top 5 when they literally just say sue him over and over and over again. But maybe there's actually something behind their list of just sue Trump. But anyway, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at how Vox, which is pretty far left, would approach the topic of stopping Trump's national emergency. Now, you may have seen Ann Coulter, for instance, not happy with it. There's a lot of Trump supporters who are not happy with how this is going down. But we'll put that aside for now and just read how the left would approach the situation. 5 ways Trump's national emergency declaration could be stopped. House Democrats could file a resolution and a lawsuit. Okay, so there's 2 reasons. I'm sorry, it's not just a lawsuit. They say Donald Trump has officially declared a national emergency in order to secure funding for his border wall, but he's also ready to be challenged in court. And he said as he said at the announcement Friday morning, we have a national emergency and we will then be sued, Trump said on Friday, outlining the steps he expected the lawsuit to take all the way up to the Supreme Court. Trump is issuing the declaration under National Emergencies Act of 1976, which lets presidents issue an emergency declaration, but under certain constraints. Namely, Trump can only use specific powers Congress has already codified by law, and he has to say which powers he's using. The act doesn't define what counts as an emergency. As Vox's John Illing, who spoke with 11 experts about the illegality of Trump's declaration, laid out, there's enough ambiguity in the law to let Trump declare an emergency. But the maneuver may not stand up to legal scrutiny once challenged in court. Okay, here's the thing. We've got a debate in the media over whether or not what's going on at the border is an emergency or not. And the reality is, it's not for you to decide. And as they've even pointed out, Vox said there's enough ambiguity to say, yes, Trump can declare an emergency. It's also important to point out that Obama declared many emergencies, and and I think many of them, I don't have the full details, had to do with foreign circumstances, right? So things in other countries like Yemen, for instance. And apparently there's one having to do with Venezuela. If Trump is talking about border security and wants to consider it an emergency, he can, plain and simple. So they say House Speaker Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced Friday that they were prepared to take multiple routes to try and block Trump's efforts. The Congress will defend our constitutional authorities in Congress, in the courts, and in the public using every remedy available. There are several different paths to challenging the declaration. Here are some of the most likely. Here's what's funny. I think there's actually only one thing here on the list, but for some reason Vox wanted to make it seem like they had multiple avenues of recourse. They say a joint resolution of termination contesting the status of the emergency. This one makes sense. Congressional Democrats have already said they plan to use any means they have to oppose Trump's national emergency, including a legislative check. A resolution contesting the status of the national emergency, that's part of the National Emergencies Act. Both chambers of Congress would need to approve the resolution by a simple majority. That's 51 votes in the Senate and 218 votes in the House. They'll likely get the House, but not the Senate. Joaquin Castro and Ocasio-Cortez announced Friday that they are ready to introduce a bill in the House that will block the emergency declaration. Castro has previously said he was prepared to introduce this resolution in the House, where Democrats have a comfortable majority. It remains to be seen whether the Senate has the numbers to approve it. The 47-member Democratic caucus would need 4 Republicans to join them. And we can see Cortez tweeted about it. If they can get the votes, the resolution then heads to Trump's desk, where he's expected to veto it. It's worth noting that Trump has threatened to veto many, many bills, but has yet to actually do so during his presidency. Because of his expected veto, stopping the declaration this way would require a veto-proof majority, which consists of a 2/3 vote in both the House and Senate. Never going to happen. To reach that threshold in both chambers, Democrats would need the support of a hefty number of Republicans so they can get to 67 votes in the Senate and 290 in the House. It's unlikely this many Republicans would go directly up against the president. Now, congressional Democrats could sue the White House. 3, sue the White House. 4, sue the White House. 5, sue the White House. So it's like they come up with one legitimate avenue of recourse, which is the contesting the emergency, which they can't do, and then just list out all of the different people who could sue him. So yes, you could say there's 2 ways they could stop him: through a resolution and through a lawsuit. But they do break it down. So let's try and figure out what's the nuance here. Congressional Democrats sue the White House. As Pelosi and Schumer both mentioned, taking this fight to the courts is another possible means of blocking the emergency declaration. And there's precedent, one set by House Republicans. House Democrats could sue the White House on the grounds that it is effectively bypassing Congress's constitutional power of the purse, the same logic Republicans used in 2014 against the Obama administration. At the time, Republicans argued that officials attempted to use federal funds that had not been approved by Congress to pay insurers under the Affordable Care Act. In that case, a federal judge ruled that Republicans had the grounds to sue the White House because its efforts infringed on Congress's authority over appropriations. House Democrats could also contest the status of the national emergency by arguing that it's not actually an emergency at all, though experts have said that the law has typically granted the president a wide berth to determine what an emergency is. Now, I will point out, Trump said in his speech that morning that I didn't need to do this, I just wanted to do it faster. You could say that's him admitting it's not an emergency, but I still think that's up for interpretation, which Trump would win on, because think about the statement. Trump saying, I didn't need to do this doesn't mean there's no emergency. It just means Trump doesn't need to solve the emergency, okay? Whether or not Trump needs to take care of an emergency doesn't determine whether or not it is an emergency, and that's probably a strong argument that will work. Now, landowners could sue the White House. But hold on. They say 5 ways Trump's national emergency declaration could be stopped. Right. I feel like they kind of framed it in such a way that it's a political block, but maybe that's just on me. But let's read on anyway. Long before Trump's emergency declaration, one likely source of resistance has been clear: people who own land along the U.S.-Mexico border where Trump wants to build the wall. As the New York Times pointed out in 2017, dozens of lawsuits involving landowners in Texas were filed after President George W. Bush in 2006 signed the Secure Fence Act mandating fencing and walls be built along parts of the border. And in the case of Trump's wall, the scenario is likely to be similar. But this is likely to happen regardless, and it likely won't stop the wall. Okay, it's not going to. Trump, I believe right now, Trump isn't planning on building that 30-foot big beautiful concrete 2,000-mile wall. I think he's looking at what ICE wants, and he's got around $8 billion he can appropriate for this for the endeavor. I believe you will likely see these lawsuits, and I believe you're going to see constitutional libertarians pushing back against Trump because of eminent domain. The federal government can legally invoke eminent domain, a power to take private land or property and convert it into public use enshrined within the U.S. Constitution. But if Trump tries to do so for the border wall, he could very well face a fight. Landowners could sue, as they did after Bush's order, to keep the government from taking their land, and those lawsuits could last a long time. The Washington Post in January reported that 334 eminent domain lawsuits were filed in South Texas under the Bush administration, and 60 to 70 of them are still pending. I personally am no fan of eminent domain, period. If you want land, you buy it, you don't seize it, okay? Look, if the government wants to take this land and build the wall, they need to offer up a good deal to the private landowners. I do not believe the government should have the right to seize property in most circumstances. This is a challenge. There is a challenge here. Trump has declared a national emergency, and the security of the nation supersedes the private property of the individual. However, there must be extreme circumstances, in my opinion, and I personally do not believe a border wall satisfies the requirement of extreme circumstances to seize private property. Okay. In fact, short of a ground invasion, I do not believe there is any reason, in my opinion, why the government should be seizing private property for the most part. I understand there's nuance and there's unknown unknowns. There are things I don't understand. If a bunch of people raided the U.S. and we had people who were manufacturing useless products that were using up aluminum and steel, and the government said we need to produce weapons to defend against a ground invasion or some serious threat. Sure. If there's a gigantic meteor about to destroy the entire planet, and the only way to stop it is for the government to nationalize all manufacturing, for all governments everywhere to do so, and there's some individual who for some reason doesn't want to get involved, I can understand that to an extent. The problem with that is, when it comes to the idea of a giant meteor hurtling towards Earth, you can see in the sky, and you're like, wow, we've got a month to solve that problem. It's visible, it's apparent, but also you have the challenge of whether or not it's actually, a serious threat and the government has a right to seize property is seriously difficult it's rough, man. Because you could have the government under a Democratic administration saying climate change will destroy the planet. We're going to nationalize things, right? And no, I'm sorry. It's a philosophical debate, and I don't believe the government should have that much authority. It's a challenge. It really is. I know there's going to be a bunch of conservatives who are less libertarian who are going to be like, nah, We need it's only taking up a small fraction, to put this barrier down. It's tough. Me, not a big fan of government powers and such. But we're running a little long. Let's just go over these a little bit. Liberal activist groups could sue the White House. The ACLU, which has filed multiple lawsuits against the Trump administration on Friday, said it planned to sue the president over his blatantly illegal declaration of a national emergency. Right. This is going to fall just in line with with the congressional Democrats' lawsuit. I don't think it matters that much that they're not politicians, and California and other states could sue. They say, soon after Trump's announcement on Friday, the state of California set in motion plans to file a lawsuit against his emergency declaration. Once again, it's the same thing, just more lawsuits. And ultimately, I think it comes down to people can stop Trump. And they've set up 5. Right. I could make 6 saying libertarians could sue Trump. Republicans could try and stop him. A small faction of Republicans who oppose Donald Trump's authority could. Look, this list is not exhaustive, and it's kind of absurd the way they framed it. But they do bring up some interesting points about the potential for who might go up against Trump, and they've missed several. I think they should have absolutely included potential for libertarian groups to sue over an encroachment of executive authority and things of that nature. But whatever. We'll wrap up here. I got some more videos coming up in a few minutes, and I will see you then.